Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video, where today I'm going to be talking about the crimes of Mary Bell. Her name is infamous in the UK. She was just a child herself, 10 years old, when she strangled and murdered two young boys in Scotswood, Newcastle in England. Why did she do it? And how much responsibility can you really hold on Mary herself? Was this a case of nature versus nurture? Could the crimes have been avoided? It's a really interesting case to delve into. Mary Flora Bell was born on the 26th of May 1957 to her mother, 17-year-old Betty Bell. Mary never really knew who her father really was, and it's reported that she may have been the product of incest between her mother and her maternal grandfather. For the most of her life, she believed her father to be Billy Bell, the criminal married to her mother. But there is question over this because Mary was already a baby when the two got married. Betty was a severe alcoholic. She'd been sectioned at least once and struggled with her mental health. Betty was also a sex worker, specialising in sadomasochism, something which she likely wasn't quiet or shy about, and is something that Mary certainly bore witness to as she grew up, this mixture of sex and violence. Apparently, once Mary was placed into Betty's arms after she gave birth, the first thing she said was, "Take this thing away from me." Betty immediately rejected her own daughter, and reports say that she even tried to kill her on more than one occasion, by feeding her an overdose of sleeping pills or accidentally dropping her out of a window. Betty had zero maternal instinct. She didn't want to have to raise a child. She was a child herself. If the reports of Mary being a product of incest are to be believed, then it might be easier to understand why Betty may have felt such a deep rejection of her child. The book Cries on Her, The Story of Mary Bell by Gitta Sereni talks of how from the age of 4, Betty would pimp her own daughter out to paedophiles, forcing her to engage in sexual acts. It is worth noting that Cries on Her was an incredibly controversial book though. Sereni had paid Mary Bell to collaborate with her on the biography, and a lot of the information in it does come directly from the horse's mouth, from Mary. But that's a murderer being paid for her crimes, for her story. It was even condemned by the then Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. So this book is incredibly controversial, and a lot of people say that we shouldn't believe what is written in it. The family lived in Scotswood, in the west end of Newcastle. It was a close-knit, working-class community, the kind of place where all the neighbours knew each other, where children would play out on the street together for hours on end. But it was also impoverished, with high rates of unemployment and many people struggling to make ends meet. The reason children were left to their own devices so much was because the parents had to work to pay the bills and to feed the children. Very few people in Scotswood had anything, so there's very little competition between the people, leading to this sort of close-knit vibe. But it was also the kind of place where you couldn't leave your washing out to dry without keeping an eye on it because it would get stolen. The Bell house in White House Road was particularly bad. It was filthy, never cleaned, it didn't even have any furniture. Mary lived in abject poverty and was neglected by her parents for the most part, left to raise herself. Everyone in the area knew of Betty Bell and her reputation, and they stayed away because she was a lady of the night. Billy Bell was also an alcoholic, and it's likely that violence was very much the norm in Mary's household, between her parents and between her mother and her clients. Mary was a child who knew nothing but pain and upset. She never received a mother's love. At school, she was known to be a chronic liar and very disruptive of class. She spoke about how she wanted to hurt people, and she very much struggled to make friends, her violence pushing her peers away, leading to even deeper isolation. The children kept away from Mary because they knew they had to be careful around her. It was a known fact to never turn your back on Mary Bell. How is this something that the children were so aware of, but the adults all seemed to turn a blind eye? Mary did make one friend though. 13-year-old Norma Bell, same surname, no relation. Norma was a couple of years older than Mary, but no more intelligent. Many media reports note Norma as being slow-witted, whilst others say that she may have had a severe learning difficulty. I'm honestly not too sure if that is the case or not. Whilst the basics of Mary's story are well known across my country, it's actually been surprisingly difficult to find consistent information on the details of her case. Regardless, it seems to be the general consensus that Norma was the opposite of Mary in every way. Teachers reported that Mary was a very bright girl. She was very intelligent but very angry, whereas Norma was just sort of quiet, shy, not very bright. On one occasion, Mary tried to strangle a young girl and suffocate her by filling her mouth with sand, whilst Norma held the girl down. The girl managed to get away and the incident was reported to the police, but no action was taken, as with every act of violence that Mary showed. The girl said that Mary was very dominating in this scenario. Norma did hold her down when instructed, but as soon as she realised how seriously Mary was trying to hurt this girl, she jumped away in fear. Another time, Mary stubbed a cigarette out on a classmate's cheek. And then on another occasion, it said that she and Norma took a 3-year-old boy out to buy some sweets, and later that day he was found wandering the streets, lost and confused and bleeding. Once again, the police were involved, but no action was taken. Mary carries on unchecked with terrible consequences. It was the 25th of May 1968 when things took a turn for the worst, when 4-year-old Martin Brown was murdered by Mary Bell, just the day before her 11th birthday. Although at the time it was unclear how he died, with the pathologist unable to reach a conclusion, it later transpired that he had been strangled. He was found by a group of children in a derelict house near Scotswood, lying in the bedroom with a small amount of blood coming out of the side of his mouth. Next to him laid a bottle of tablets, left there from the tenant of the house before it was abandoned. Other than this, there were no clues as to his cause of death. Throughout the 60s, Newcastle was undergoing serious redevelopment and so many houses were being demolished to make way for the new, particularly in the more poverty-stricken areas. Many old houses had been abandoned and left to go derelict, and Martin was found in an area known as Rat Alley. Children in the area would often go and play in these old houses. It was one of their favourite pastimes, or I suppose one of the only pastimes to do in the area. Martin had been playing outside with his friends on the day he died. He was this adorable little boy with blonde curls, blue eyes. His mother described him as cheeky and mischievous. As I said, it wasn't unusual for children to disappear off playing for hours at a time in this area. His mother, June, said that she wasn't overly concerned when he didn't appear home for a few hours, but at 5 p.m. she received a call to say that Martin had been in an accident. June rushes to the house in Rat Alley where he'd been found to find a man stood outside holding Martin in his arms and crying, his body grey. Martin was pronounced dead upon arrival at Newcastle Hospital. June would later say that Mary and Norma used to often babysit at Martin's aunt's house. Every time they saw June after Martin's death, they would ask how she was doing. They seemed genuinely concerned. Until one day they turned up at her house asking if they can see Martin. Assuming that Mary and Norma are young and confused, she says that they can't. Martin died. Mary replies, "I know, I want to see him in his coffin." On Monday the 27th of May, 2 days after Martin's death, the police were called to attend a break-in at a local nursery, where a number of pieces of paper had been found. On the papers were notes: "I murder so that I may come back," "We murder, watch out," and "We did murder Martin Brown." They were clearly written by a child, but the police initially dismissed them as some kind of sick game, kids being kids. It later transpired that Mary and Norma had broken into the nursery together. Now this is a big move for any killer to make. I mean, taunting the police is something killers like Jack the Ripper, Dennis Rader, David Berkowitz and the like do. It's part of the game for them. The psychology behind a child doing something like this is fascinating. What was going through Mary's head? Was it guilt? Was she wanting to subconsciously get caught? Or was it part of the game for her? Was she smart enough to know that the police probably wouldn't be looking for a child, even when they received these notes? That very same day, Mary attended school and wrote in her school newsbook about Martin being found at the house. That there'd been a boy who just lay down and died is what she wrote. She drew a graphic picture, at least as graphic as a child's drawing could be, of Martin on the ground with a workman finding the body. Next to him was a bottle with word tablet written on the side. Nobody picked up on this at the time. On the front cover of the book, she drew a newspaper with the headline, "Boy found dead in old house." Again, no one picked up on this. And then on the 31st of July 1968, Mary strangled and killed 3-year-old Brian Howe in the same area of Scotswood. He'd gone with friends to watch the demolition of houses in Rat Alley, which was a favourite pastime of Scotswood children. Whilst there, he was picked up by Mary and Norma to go and play with them. Once again, Brian was a blonde, curly-haired boy and just absolutely adorable. His body was found in wasteland not far from his home, lying spread eagle amongst the concrete and the bushes. His post-mortem showed strangulation as the cause of death and cut marks all over his body. It turned out that Mary had gone back later to the scene alone, which again is a weird connection to other serial killers who get pleasure from returning to the scene of their crimes to visit their victims' bodies. She took a pair of scissors with her and mutilated the child's body, cutting into his thigh, mutilating his penis and removing a clump of hair from his head. She also carved an M, presumably for Mary, into his abdomen. The pathologist came to the conclusion that this was the work of a child, and the police made the link back to Martin's case, which at the time they'd assumed was an accident, a conclusion that everyone, including Martin's mother June, was very happy with at the time. But the similarities to Brian's very obvious murder were too clear to ignore. They said at the time they were 60% sure that they were linked. So now the police were looking for a child murderer, and it didn't take long for them to begin to pay attention to little Mary Bell, now 11 years old. Whenever a conference about the crimes took place, Mary was there in the front row listening intently. You couldn't ignore her little face in a crowd of adults. It then transpired that Mary had been boasting in the playground about how she'd strangled a little boy. It really didn't take a genius for the trail to lead to Mary Bell. The police turn up at the Bell house to question Mary, but they're chased away by Billy, who refused to let them in. They leave, not having any other option, but then they find there had actually been a witness at the scene on the day that Brian had been murdered. A 9-year-old boy with the mental age of a 4-year-old had also been at the wasteland that day. He had seen everything. It turns out that Mary had a very specific technique for strangling her victims. She would massage their necks, telling them they had a sore throat and that she knew how to make it better. She tightened her grip around their necks until they suffocated. After this information came to light, the police had no option but to pull both Mary and Norma in for questioning, also calling in a child psychologist to speak to them. Apparently when the police went to pick up Mary, she said, "Send for my solicitor," a child who acted like an adult. When questioned, she tried to throw suspicion onto an innocent boy in a very cunning and insidious manner. She knew what she was doing. Mary could never quite relax when the police were talking to her. The psychologist will say that she would speak of her mother, her dog, her friendship with Norma, but never about what she knew she was there for. But Norma was different. Norma didn't have Mary's confidence and she was very shy and scared. She struggled to speak to the police at all. The girls were both sent into care in Newcastle whilst the investigation continued. Mary was the kind of person that people could warm to if she let them. She was incredibly bright for her age. She was a very, very intelligent kid. She could hold full conversations with adults as if she were the same age as them. She was charming and vivacious, but everything she said was calculated. One detective on her case described her as having a computer brain. She never seemed to understand the consequences, the enormities of the crime that she committed. In fact, she never once admitted guilt, and she was sure enough of herself that even the police began to question their own theory. Until her school teacher came forward, who decided to have a read back through some of Mary's work to see if there were any clues as to her mindset, which was glaringly obvious as soon as he saw the news book, in which she'd drawn the scene of Martin's death. He sends the book to the investigators, who know they've got the right person as soon as they see the drawing. Mary had drawn and labelled tablets lying next to her depiction of Martin's body. This news had never been released to the public. You would only have known about the tablets if you'd been there. It was the 8th of August 1968 when both Mary and Norma were charged with murder, and on the 5th of December the trial began, taking 9 days in total. Compared to what you would expect in a case like this nowadays, there was very little media coverage at the time due to the sensitivity around the case. Due to the fact both of these girls were children, there were some allowances made throughout the trial. The fact that this was a murder case meant that the regular trial procedures had to be followed, but their lawyers were allowed to sit with the girls and comfort them throughout, which wouldn't necessarily be allowed in an adult trial. Mary was described as impervious throughout the trial. She sat there stony-faced, rarely showing any emotion. She gave very straightforward, intelligent answers, and she never skirted around what she was saying. She was reported as getting emotional only once, when she was asked if she'd ever attempted to kill a pigeon by strangulation. She actually got so upset by this question that the judge had to pause the proceedings to calm her down. Norma, on the other hand, was described as being the opposite of Mary. She was clearly not very bright and very insecure. She was entirely out of her depth in any courtroom, which you would expect to be the case with most children, but it just wasn't with Mary. From the get-go, it was very clear that Mary was the leader, the more dominant personality, and Norma was simply a follower. She would say when questioned that she left the scene when Mary ignored her pleas to stop hurting Brian. She blamed the entire thing on Mary, whilst Mary blamed the entire thing on Norma. We'll never know for sure exactly what went down or the dynamics between the two of them, I suppose. Psychiatrists were brought into the courtroom to give their opinions, and it was pretty much unanimous. Mary had all of the traits of a psychopath. She lacked regular feeling, she was intelligent and devious. Mary was found guilty of manslaughter and was to be detained on Her Majesty's pleasure, whilst Norma was acquitted on the grounds that she was simple-minded and she was sent back home. It became clear after Mary was sentenced that actually nobody had really thought through what they were going to do with her after this point. Everyone was in agreement that she needed to be rehabilitated, not detained. She was too young to be detained in hospital under the Mental Health Act, and it was just a very unusual and unique case for all involved. It's not often an 11-year-old becomes a double murderer. So she's sent to an approved school with secure accommodation, Red Bank in Lancashire. Mary spent 12 years locked away, 6 of those spent at Red Bank before going to an adult prison. Despite a brief escape in 1977, she was a fairly well-behaved prisoner. She was eventually released from Style Prison in Cheshire at 23 years old, when the parole board deemed her to be no longer a threat to society. She said that she was stunned by the news that they were going to release her. She didn't think they ever would. From Style, she was moved to Arscombe Grange, which is an open prison near York, where she was rehabilitated for a year. Some did have concerns about her abilities to readjust the outside world. She had no idea how to function in society. She spent more of her life in institutions than she had out of them. She went to live in a hostel on the prison site and got a job assembling electrical equipment at the Remploy Centre in Leeds, which is a place intended for people who have been ill or out of work for some time. She was even given home leave to go and see her mother for the first time in 12 years, an experience which I'm sure was confusing for all involved, especially seeing as they never had a particularly loving or nurturing relationship. The journey to work consisted of a mile-long walk to the bus stop and 2 bus journeys every single day, there and back. And it didn't take long for her to get recognised, and within 2 weeks, the press published details of Mary Bell's new life. Eventually, she did manage to merge back into normal society, although she began drinking and taking drugs. She ended up getting pregnant and had an abortion, all whilst being apparently rehabilitated at Arscombe. She didn't particularly look forward to being released into the outside world. But of course she was, and upon release she was given a new identity which is prohibited by law to be revealed by the media. Not that that's ever really stopped them, of course. She was reportedly caught for shoplifting soon after because she wanted to get sent back to prison because she just didn't know how to function in society. It seemed that eventually she did figure out how to survive though and went on to live a relatively normal life. She never reoffended after that, and today she'd be in her 60s and she had a daughter in the 80s. The news of this did leak to the media, but again they were prohibited from releasing any more information about her or her daughter's identity. This is a very confusing and emotional case for all involved. This is a girl who killed 2 young children with seemingly very little remorse at the time. Some reports say now though that she does live in regret, as you would hope she would do. Does Mary Bell deserve to have anyone feel sorry for her? Some would argue that an 11-year-old would have a full understanding of death, murder and the consequences of that. But this is a child, on the other hand, who never knew love and care. All she knew growing up was violence and anger. She was failed by the people who raised her. News sources report that Mary Bell developed into a morally responsible adult and raised her own child with love and care. I'm going to be very interested in seeing people's opinions on this one. But Mary isn't the most important person in the story, remember. Martin and Brian are the children who lost their lives. Their families, they are the victims here. In my personal opinion, I think all 3 children are the victims of the failures in society. If somebody, if a teacher, some adult had paid attention to what Mary Bell was doing before the murders, then there may have been some sort of intervention. I mean, all of the children of Scotswood knew Mary Bell and knew not to turn their back on her. So how come no adults ever picked up on this? Even when the police were told of what she was doing, nobody did anything. Do you think Mary deserved to spend the rest of her life in prison, or did they do the right thing by releasing her? I mean, she's clearly never reoffended, she hasn't killed anymore, so is it right that she's released? There are so many morally and ethically interesting questions to ask here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.